Shorter than that, huh? Okay, all right, well, there you go. The format, this is a workshop setting, as you can see. It's meant to be interactive. There's a lot of dialogue. We want questions. We want input. So that's why we have it here this morning. We've used this room here in the past when we've done visioning sessions. It's more conducive. The facility is already staffed on the weekends, so that makes it very convenient. I didn't mention the audio recording that's going to take place today. So now about the workshop, just a little bit of the timeline, how we got here. I've been wanting to do this for a while now. In fact, I talked to our consultant. It was this time last year, who I'll introduce to you in a minute. We put some money in the budget, in the mid-year budget, last year to do this, and that was approved by you in February. Then the discussion about the sales tax started. So the consultant felt that it would be better to get results from the community survey that we did, that is the poll, before we move on. And so therefore we postponed it. So again, we were going to hold it in spring of this year, but we didn't. So we started, as you all recall, we started the poll in April, and the results came out in May. Then we had a change in the council, as you know, Councilmember Martinez with her retirement. So we postponed it again. So here we are today. So this is once again different from goal setting that we have done in the past. There's more components to it, as you will see. This is going to essentially set the tone for our organization. It's going to tell us who we are, what we actually are made of, and it'll help us to set also the goals in each year when you adopt the budget. So anyway, I don't want to steal too much of the consultant's thunder, who I'll bring out right now since he has a full presentation. But at this point, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Mike Shalito with Shalito Consulting. Mike is a retired city manager from Northern California. Mike does this for a living. He trains councils and cities. He also works for the League of California Cities. He does some of their conferences, the new mayor and council member conferences. Mike has done this type of session for the cities locally of Downey and Lakewood. So now it's our turn to be with Mike. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mike Shalito. Yes, Kevin.
Sorry, before you turn over to Mike, just for the record, it is, since I forgot to turn on the recording device, it is November 16th. Roll call was taken and all council members are present.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Okay, Mike, turn it over to you.
Morning. Where'd you get that shirt at?
I know.
Goodwill.
Goodwill. Oh, you hear that? There we go.
How much did you pay for a shirt, Kevin?
Thank
Great
you.
shirt.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to be here. As John said, I had the pleasure of working. I worked for the city of Roosevelt in Northern California for 30-something years. I retired around 10 years ago, and I've had the opportunity to work with a number of cities, both in Northern California and Southern California, a little bit on these kind of things with goal setting and strategic plans and other kinds of things that I think help with decision making. So what I'd like to do today with y'all is to just walk through kind of what we have covered in the first two workshops, but I'm going to do it relatively quickly and sort of to get to the meat in that. But the other thing I'd like to frame is that the information with we share, I would say at the moment today is probably 75-80%, baked, better than half baked. But part of it is to provide input from the rest of the council, and then subsequently the staff is going to take this out to their various departments to get input as well. And so this is really a work in progress. But I want to start a little bit, which I did in the first workshop, with some of the information that I had the opportunity for 3 years to work with the League of Cities and the new mayors and council members workshop. And I'm going to just give an excerpt of that talk because I think it speaks to what we're trying to do today and the importance of vision and results. And that in particular is one of those things I think that is relevant to that. So this is a little bit of an excerpt from a presentation that I had done. I think council and staff all sort of strive to kind of create good governance and all of those things that go into that. And that's probably one of the key things that good councils do is the governance of the city. I think there is a challenge of elected service with any council, with any elected board, whether it's board of supervisors or a school board. Often there is high expectations. It's really a critical and sometimes difficult role, but by and large, almost every council member wants to do something that makes a difference in their community and make their community better, to be sure. Often roles and responsibilities are either poorly defined or understood, and you all know, and you probably know some of your fellow council members in the area or have been attending the league. Sometimes people find their way to the dais through various ways. Sometimes through commission and board training. Sometimes just straight from I'm a citizen, I get elected to the council, and so sort of figuring out how their government works and governance works. And many times there's sort of few measurements of success, and as we were talking here, part of this effort, particularly when we get into the strategic outcomes, kind of give us some information about those things that are important to success. In the notion of good governance, generally the role in any city is for the council to provide the vision, the strategic leadership, and clear expectation of results. And I'm going to come back to that notion of results several times. Probably the most important thing is that the council should primarily focus on the ends of the organization, the desired outcomes. And staff should really focus on the means to those ends, the who, how, and why, and at what cost. So the council, where are we going, why are we going there? The staff, how are we going to get there, right? And at what time and at what cost that goes on with that. The work of any city council is to work for the owners of the city, right? So if you think you're a corporation, you work for the shareholders, right? Well, the shareholders in Paramount are the owners of the city, which are clearly, but not exclusively, the residents, the taxpayers. The residents pay property tax to your city, but also other stakeholders, the businesses who contribute property taxes, the people, even visitors that come to town, or shoppers who come to town, are probably lesser stakeholders, not so much business owners, but certainly other visitors. So we talked about this notion of ends. One of those things is your job is to act as the trustee of the city's money and the assets. So not just money, but all the assets. And truly in any city, and I know Paramount a little bit, the assets of the city, the combined value of all the things the city owns and operates is in the billions of dollars of infrastructure, if you think about that. So there's a lot of stuff that you do. Part of your job is to evaluate resources consumed versus benefits gained, return on investment. You, every day when you go to the council, not every day, but when you go to council meetings or as you manage the city's budget, you should always be asking, are we getting our money's worth? And is this money well spent, right? Are we getting our money's worth? Is this money well spent? And make sure those resources are aligned with operational priorities. So one of those things when we were talking, and I was talking with John about this notion of the benefit of, particularly when we get to those strategic initiative outcomes, is to identify some priorities or operational things. Also, work with the council is a link with your residents and other stakeholders who represent your interests, to listen to your stakeholders, to listen to the residents, to businesses, and to share. So that two-way communication happens. Establish and revise policies to guide and direct the governance of the city. Your job is to make sure that your city manager does his job in the way that you expect, right? And you to hire, supervise, and evaluate the performance of really two employees. Those are your two direct hires. That's your city manager and your city attorney. That was true in my city. The council hired the city manager and the city attorney. And through the city manager, it's, in this case, his job to make sure the rest of the staff does their jobs, right? As I said at the beginning, the most important thing that any council does, and that's sort of the meat of today's discussion, is to determine what are the results that you expect to happen here in Paramount, right? Are you doing a good job? And when John asked me way back when, and I've done some goal setting and some strategic planning with some other cities, but when he sort of wanted to help out with goal setting, I said, well, in terms of strategic or overarching goals and outcomes or those things, and those hadn't been done in a while or not ever done. Sometimes when you don't have that, one of those broad outcomes that you want to expect, often goal setting just tends to be very narrowly focused on projects, what's in front of us today, right? And so we thought it would be useful. And so results, the results that you want are goals. Those are the effect you want to make on the community. They're outcomes, not effort, right? So let me explain the difference between an outcome and effort. An outcome and effort is one of the parks in Paramount are safe, clean, and green, right? That's an outcome. They're safe, clean, and green. What an effort is you mow and you fertilize and you pick up the trash. That's effort. Those are means versus ends. So safe, clean, and green is really where that focus is. And goals establish priorities for the staff and provide expectations of city measurements. So we'll talk about measurements in a minute. You know, in Verity, even when I was working, I spent, like I said, 31 years with our city, and most of my time, a bulk of my time was Parks and Recreation Libraries Director, and then I became Assistant City Manager for 6 years, and then City Manager. And a lot of time when we would do goal setting, it would really sort of be kind of focused on what's next, what's new, right? What's the new thing we're gonna do, what's a new initiative, or what's an immediate problem we need to solve or address, or what's coming down the pipeline, so that new stuff. Rarely did the sort of council, particularly on budget, focus on just general operations. But in fact, the bulk of the work of the city of Paramount is this 90% everyday stuff of opening and closing the doors, picking up the trash, making sure the sheriffs are patrolling the community, responding to fire emergencies, getting the water out, all of that stuff. But at least in our case, and in most cases, a lot of times the discussion really is on that 10%, that new stuff, right? But the 90% of the work of the city, the everyday thing if you look at your budget, that's, holy cow, that's a lot of money. Almost $45 million gets spent in all of these various departments, and their work is mostly the everyday things. The everyday running public works and public safety and general government and all those things that go along. And so the reason I'm sharing that is when we get to those strategic initiative outcomes, that's the everyday work. And I'm not saying, of course, you're gonna deal with new initiatives, that they always come, there's a new park to be built, or there's there's the sales tax thing that you're looking at, or some other thing you're addressing, but most of it is in that everyday work of the city. So I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly because I wanna go through that, and when we started out, I was a little mindful that there might have been one council member leaving early, so I wanna go through it quickly, and then we're gonna back up, if that works for you. Because I wanna give you the chance that we did, so we had 2 workshops, one was in late part of August, another was in September. We did this with the department head team on the first round. In the second round, there was 2 council subcommittee members that came and participated and provided input. So I want to share that input, but also solicit some input. Sort of, this is what we've heard so far. It's not by a long shot cast in any kind of stone. It's still open for discussion. And so one of the things we started out with, we started out with talking about what are the characteristics of achieving the Paramount Way. So you could sort of think about companies like the Apple Way or the Disney Way. So what's the Paramount Way? And these are the words that came up in our 2 meetings between the staff and the 2 council members. So the Paramount Way talked about collaborations and partnerships. Customer service is a strong ethic in this city, and it came out loud and clear. People felt staff in the city was flexible, adaptable, responsive, resilient to change. Innovation. Community engagement was something that I think was a goal of the city, but wanted to formalize it. There was a notion we could be better at that, right? Engaging the city more deliberately, more proactively. People are ethical, honest, trustworthy. The city itself is attractive, clean, well-maintained. Staff is resourceful. A lot of the services are affordable for the community. There is a result orientation. So that being said, as you think about this, maybe we'll pause on these, but as you think about this, is there something else from the council's perspective, or even the staff that have done this before, is there anything else missing in the Paramount Way as you look at this list? We'll come back if we'll do it, so, yeah.
I think the Paramount Way, as it's projected there, is very, it's defined from a certain group of individuals. So when we talk about the Paramount Way, are we talking about how staff see and council sees Paramount, or the way the community that we serve sees Paramount?
I think that's a good
'Cause I
question.
think they're distinctly different.
They may be, and in fact, you sort of have to ask that question, you know, sort of in two venues. So this list, to your point, really came from staff and the two workshops. If you'd ask the citizens, you might have something that's in addition to that or different from that, right? We'll talk about that in a second. So, but from your standpoint, is there anything else that we need to talk about? Or maybe we just walk through it kind of quickly and we'll come back to these, right? So, Councilmember Guillen?
Gillen,
Gillen? Yeah.
whichever's easiest for
Okay.
you.
Um,
I've been called a lot worse. than either
So,
of those.
how about Lori?
Got it.
All right, so to your point, one of the things I think that John said is that I think it's really useful, not what you think is important, but really what the citizens think is important. So the good news is you did a pretty extensive and statistically valid survey, by the way it was conducted, asking what mattered most, and I only took an excerpt from that. This is one page, there was a one page on the report that said these were the things that mattered most to your community. So you can really see some pretty strong themes in this. All right, not anything in particular, but maintain improving public safety, homelessness, and goodness knows that's a statewide issue, not everywhere, but certainly in the urban environments. Maintenance of streets, infrastructure, and parks. You know, and I would say I've seen a lot of these surveys in what cities do. One thing that almost every community will say is take care of what you got before you do something new. Make sure you do a good job with what you have before you add to that. City spending, transparency kind of popped up, business, employment, air pollution, traffic safety, public transportation, youth after-school programs, education, affordable housing, rents, overcrowding and parking, cleanliness, school safety, cost of living, and I think in your handout there's that detailed list where this comes from. When we did the September workshop, the group sort of added this notion more broadly that environmental health and sustainability should be an important priority, right? But this is really what your citizen said is important, and I think it's pretty diverse and it's pretty covers those sectors that we'll speak to.
Can I ask questions?
We asked, oh
You know,
yes,
just to go back on the survey, what was the, how many went out and how many did we get back?
This was done by a polling firm,
Okay.
and this was done, it's a random scientific survey, and there were, do you recall, Kevin, 400?
Yeah, about 400.
400.
266 we got back, I
Well,
think that
it
were actually
was,
valid.
no, it wasn't a matter of what was valid or not. It was 400 residents were surveyed, and then from that, there was a subsection, that's the 270, whatever it was, that was, I believe they were registered voters, I think it was. So, but overall, it was a sample of about 400 residents.
And why did we choose 400?
That, from a statistical standpoint, based on our population size, that's what was considered a good sample size and would produce what they call a margin of error in about 5%. And from a statistical standpoint, that's what is considered a viable, a good survey. You know, keep in mind, 400 may sound like a small number, considering we've got 55,000 residents in town. But from a larger perspective, when presidential surveys are done, national-wide surveys are done, they can take a sample size of 1,000 people, and from a statistical standpoint, show that that is representative of the entire nation. So.
And in fact, there was another example closer to home. There was just last week in the LA Times, there was an article about LA County and how people felt about something. Well, there are 10 million people in LA County, and the sample survey was 900. So they're able to project based on formulas and everything, how closely that it affects, or I'm sorry, how closely that is to actually the way people feel and so on and so forth. The past statistical surveys that we've conducted, or that we've had a consulting firm conduct, have been very accurate. When we did the utility users tax, for example, the polling showed that it would be approved by 73% of the voters, and it was actually approved by 72%. So it was within a margin of error. So.
You know, one of the things I think I would encourage the council to revisit is, because John shared that with me, the whole of the survey. This is just a snapshot of one slide. I took the one pic, there was one picture, it was this statement that citizen survey result, that's in your handout. It said, citizens believe the city's top priority should be this list. Now, it isn't the end-all be-all definitive list of everything. I would encourage you to look at the whole of something, right? So even as a council member, as staff, or as a community, look at this and say, what did we learn from this? What did we learn from this that matters most? Because I think the value is whether it's the council or the staff, is to focus on what matters most to the most amount of people. And you pay attention to that. If you pay attention to what matters most of the time, you'll be doing a good job with the majority of folks. So it's not the end-all be-all, but you can certainly see some themes that come out of these different questions. So the notion of public safety, the notion of maintenance and upkeep, the notion of it's a good place for kids and a safe place for kids. The support a healthy business economy. I mean, there are environmental issues. So we'll come back to that. But again, just to sort of focus on that. We asked a question in terms of external issues significantly influencing the present reality and shaping its future. So, meaning what's happening outside the city of Paramount that's going to affect your ability to do a good job, right? And so part of that was federal immigration policies and legislation, the economy in particular, public spending habits. And the city I was from, formerly City of Roseville, was a big sales tax city, meaning more than half of the city's general fund budget came from sales tax. Well, now just online, retail, all of those things, less reliance on brick and mortar stores is changing that, not only in everywhere, so it's changing spending habits. Environmental issues, air quality regulations, lack of control or limit, those things that happen even in the whole environmental regulations that get imposed on you, that you have to respond to, right? Misinformation, social media fostering lack of trust in the city. That's true in almost every city that's dealing now. When I'm starting my career in public, in the public sector, there wasn't things like Facebook, Nextdoor, Twitter, all of those kind of things. And now, those are things that are pretty common for people to share information, sometimes spread misinformation. Workforce development is an external issue in terms of just what's happening in the workforce itself. In terms of the talent pool that lives out there that might come to work for the city. State housing mandates, affordable housing that get imposed on local jurisdictions. Transit and traffic that you're not an island unto yourself, so traffic in the region affects your job. And so anything else that on this list that you think are external things that is shaping your present or will shape your future? Anything that's not on this list? We can come back to it, but at the moment. Okay, so internal things, inside the city itself, inside the organization, what are the internal issues that are affecting your ability to do its job? So capital limitations, financial constraints. Everybody has limitations on the budget. All of those kinds of issues. A limited number of full-time employees. Now just with retirement costs, employment costs, all those kind of things, the ability to have all the full-time employees you want, it's not going to happen. I mean, you have to be judicious about that. Political instability, elections, agendas. We talked about an inconsistent branded image that One of those internal issues is the Paramount brand needs to be clarified and strengthened, whatever that is, to tell that story the way you want to tell that story. I mean, like, how would I illustrate this? So a well-branded thing would be, let's say, a company like Apple is well-branded, or Disney is well-branded. We instantly kind of have an image. But if you were sort of, what's the Paramount brand? What's the Paramount image in the minds and hearts of the community? I think you need to know that. Now, part of that is what we're going to talk about when we talk about mission, vision, values. It's start to speak to that brand. What do you want your brand to be, right? Turnover, succession planning, retirements, those kind of things, and that's kind of pretty common. You know, there are some people moving on to new jobs that could theoretically happen, right? Poor relationships, lack of trust and civility in government, those kind of things. And I would just tell you that that's not uncommon, sort of how goes the federal, state government also affects local government. People are pretty, I mean, if you look at the electorate, I mean, throughout California and throughout the country, people are a little bit angry sometimes, jaded, skeptical, lack of trust. I would say that if it's good anywhere, it happens at the local level. But, you know, for people's trust, I mean, what's your level of trust in Washington? Or what's your level of trust at the state legislature? You kind of, you just like don't have a lot of trust. And so that's an issue that you need to strengthen that, right? So I asked another question, said, what are the most important results the city manager and through the manager the staff must accomplish without fail, or you're not doing your job? I mean, if you don't do this, John's not doing his job. So one is the budget. Balanced budget, responsible, transparent spending, spend the money wisely, spend it on the right things in the right way. We felt that the most important things that the overall environment that in Paramount residents need to feel and in fact are safe, right? Not only feel safe, but they are safe. Want to make sure that the city is a good place to work, right? It's a good environment to work. Ethics, ethical leadership, honest, respect, trustworthy. You have to have that in your city manager. You need to have effective and timely two-way communication between the council and the manager and the staff and back and forth, that you are informed and hear about things that are important and can respond to that, and then respond to timely, appropriate, reasonable service, that you provide service in a responsive and responsible way. Anything missing that just jumps out at you? Yeah.
I think there's a word that I've always talked about is being proactive.
Proactive.
You know, I think.
Kevin, can you give me my note taker again, just so I'm not back and forth? So to that part of this, would it be on this, add the word proactive?
As proactive, instead of being
Yeah.
reactive, let's,
Yeah.
like, as a team, we could be proactive.
Get in front of the problem, right?
Correct.
Somebody once said, I love this quote, but somebody said, the higher you go in the organization, the more time you should spend solving problems you're about to have, not the ones you're having today. So that
Quoted
notion, right, to get out in front of that.
Well, who quoted that?
That's at this moment, it's my quote. But I heard it from someone. No, but I think that's true, right? So the everyday folks that are answering the phones at the front desk, they're dealing with today's problem. But your job is to look ahead. And frankly, your job is to mind the store, but also look ahead as well. Where are you going, right? Where are you going, right? All right, so I want to talk about, this is kind of the meat of the thing, and mission, vision, values, and strategic initiatives. So if you've never done this, so I want to try and make it simple, but vision really is the outcome. What are we trying to accomplish, right? I'm fond of this quote from the philosopher Nietzsche. Philosopher Nietzsche said the most common form of human stupidity is forgetting what you were trying to accomplish in the first place. I mean, isn't that true? That what are we trying to accomplish in the first place? And that's really what the vision should be, right? What results are we trying to accomplish? Mission is your purpose. Now, we'll go to that in a second, but Paramount's purpose is kind of decided. You're a city, you do city stuff, right? Values are really important. And what are those guiding beliefs and principles? How shall we behave? How shall we treat people? How shall we treat each other? How shall we treat the community? What do we want to be known for, right? Strategic initiatives are the past, and now we start to get specific on results. And we'll talk about that. So there are different goals about creating mission, vision, values. One is I'm a big fan of keep it short. Make it short and memorable. Because I don't know how many places I walk in, there's some poster with a whole bunch of words that no one ever looks at, right? So keep it short. I mean, sort of like when I said keep it short, Disney's vision is to we create happiness, right? That's keeping it short. Or Ben and Jerry's, I just happen to know it was. Ben and Jerry's vision is to make the best possible ice cream in the nicest possible way. I mean, I like that just because it's memorable. It should be inspiring. There should be a little bit of reach to it, and uniquely relevant to the Paramount way. So you shouldn't adopt things. So we went through this a little bit. So the first thing we started with the mission statements, the city's purpose, why do you exist, what do you do to accomplish your vision, right? Who do you serve? Who do you serve? You serve primarily your residents, your business owners, people who contribute to the tax base of the city primarily are that, but other people, visitors to Paramount, guests, partners, anybody that helps you succeed. And what kind of services you provide? You know, cities are different. You know, you provide public safety services via contract, but not every city is a full service city that may not be doing those things, right? Vision statements really is what your desired outcome, if you're successful in accomplishing your mission. We know what does good work look like. We know we're successful as a city when we get these things done, and should describe results, outcomes, if the organization does, and why those results are important, right? One of the things we did this little with the staff who did this, because sometimes when you try to have a discussion about this, everybody's all over the board. So we sort of did a quick Survey Monkey thing to sort of say, what are in your view, what rate the top 3 vision things for the Paramount? And these are the things they came out: livable, high quality lives, safe, responsive to community. This really it started to inform the direction we would go in. But you could see definitely there was some things in the top third of that. Again, we talked about values. Really, values drive organization culture. And it was interesting when we talked about values, particularly the September workshop, one of the things that came up as simple as that we want to be nice. We want to be helpful and nice. And so those things that if you think about, you know, if I was like, when you think about values, you think about what words instantly pop in your head, right? So if I said the car company Volvo, what word comes in your mind?
Safety.
Yeah, see, they cause you to believe that that's important to them. Now, in fact, they do make a little bit, they spend more money making their cars a little bit safer, but those are the words that pop into your head when you say that, as opposed to, well, like, let's use a negative example. If I said the California DMV, what word pops into your head? Now, I'm not picking on the DMV. I'm not picking on the DMV. I've had a good experience at the DMV, actually, when I had an appointment. But at some point, if you ask anybody in California about the DMV, you're going to go, oh. You know, it's just one of those things that pop into your head, right? So we'll do that. So we asked the staff in the same Survey Monkey thing, what are the values that are most important to you? And this is, you should feel, as council, you should feel good about this, because this primarily came from your staff, but the other 2 council members also had a chance to weigh in. That what values should be guiding principles? So honesty and ethics, responsive to community needs, responsible stewards of the city's money and assets, community and service orientation, professional, efficient, and effective, transparent and accountable, innovative, progressive, team-oriented. So these were their values that they sort of said that started to inform what we came out with. So, leading up to the big reveal. So, at the moment, this is what the group came up with in terms of mission, vision, value statements. And a little bit of this, it was honestly, it's been, I don't know, 8 iterations of these, because we're from the 2 meetings we had, we started writing some things down, we followed up, then we had a couple of conference calls with a smaller committee, and we were sending things back, and people were talking them over. So I'm not saying these aren't set in stone, but this is where it is at the moment, right? So the mission is dedicated to providing fiscally responsible services that maintain a vibrant community, right? So there's a couple of words that came in. Fiscally responsible, people want you to be that, use the public's money well. You do services, and service was meant to account for services, facilities, infrastructure, though, the sort of catch-all word. And wanted maintenance, the city's well maintained, and vibrant community. The community is live and thriving, right? That was sort of the notion of that. The vision, a city that is safe, healthy, and attractive. Those are sort of the words that came up. So healthy was to take into account both quality of life, livability, environmental health, physical health, all of those things. So you'll catch those. We'll use that word again. Attractive, well-maintained, those kind of things. The values that were arrived at was respectful and ethical behavior, service excellence, responsive, accountable, and professionalism is another third value. Innovation and creativity, always looking to get better. Effective communication and transparency, that we're effectively communicating and we're transparent with what we do and inclusive with what we do. So that's sort of where it's at the moment. So let's pause for a second. Rather than, as you look at that, is even the staff who came up with it, if you look at it again, the other thing that I pointed is, I put this in sort of this Venn diagram because that's actually how it works. Or the other way to do it, but it was not as good. Think about mission, vision, values, creating the soup of the city, right? There are 3 ingredients that go into a pot that become who you are, right? Those are some things that, so there is meant to be overlap of these kinds of things. Anything initial first thoughts? We'll come back to this as well because I want to go through the strategic initiative outcomes. Any initial thoughts? How many people generally, look like we're generally kind of like this consensus? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Raise your hand just so I can see.
What's your question?
Do you generally kind of like it? Not necessarily that this is set in stone, because we're not approving anything today. We're just getting feedback. Generally, like most everybody, is there anything kind of missing that you sort of, a word or a notion or an idea or a concept?
And I'm sorry, real quick, Council, before you answer that question, before the discussion evolves, my plan is to broadcast this. This is, in a sense, who we are. Not only to the public, but to prospective employees that come on board. For instance, you take the values. During new employee orientation, so it's ingrained from everybody from the rec leader up to the assistant city manager and so on, that we are an organization that values, and it's in here, it's right here, we value respectful and ethical behavior, we value service excellence, we value responsiveness, accounting professional, we value so on and so forth. So this is, I think that would help you kind of answer Mike's question when you know what the plan is, how we're going to roll this out in a sense. So
yeah, and I would add to not only the employees, but I would add to this anybody who represents the city of Paramount. So council,
right,
your commissions, anybody that's in that sort of puts on the Paramount hat in any way, shape, or form. These become your values. Those are. Do you understand that and kind of look at that? So those, again, I want to walk through, give it the big picture, and then we'll back up on a couple of things. Yes.
So the only thing I see missing out of it, and I like the way it overlays because they each, intertwine with each other. But the only thing I see is I would like to see something about encompassing all people within the community, regardless of their race, religion. I think needs to be something about encompassing the community as well, because they are the stakeholders as well, and their behavior or the way they maintain themselves also affects the city.
Would the word inclusive?
Inclusive.
Would the word
and,
inclusive?
Yeah, I think inclusive
So
would be good.
let's find out where that might fit. Okay.
Because it's just talking about
Yeah.
like what we expect of
Yeah.
the staff and such. But I want to include the residents and the business professionals in that as well.
Okay. All right. Good. I think inclusive is one of those words that shows up a lot, and we'll do that. So let's walk through, and we'll come back in a second. This is the meaty part of this, and this is what I want you to look at both today and then take the handout and feel free to edit and add. Strategic initiative outcomes. Really remember at the very beginning when I talked about the numeric thing, I said the results of the city is the most important job that you have as council members. Say what do we want to accomplish around here, right? We know we're a good city when we do this, when this happens. Right? So that's what initiatives do, is that how you accomplish your vision mission. The rest of the mission, vision, values are a little bit like, vision statements sometimes can look like world peace, right? We want everybody to get along, right? But how are you going to do that, right? And so each outcome will have defined strategic objectives as well as action plans, and then measurements and metrics are still to follow. We want to make sure that we got that. So I want to, there were 6 categories of these, and the cities that I've worked with that have strategic plans, or that we develop strategic plans for, one of those things, the way you use these strategic initiatives is almost everything that the city does should be fit into some or many of these, because there's not one that anything fits in, but it's sort of those broad categories that talk about the city's service, right? And so number 1 was a safe community, number 2 was community health, 3 was economic health, 4 environmental health, 5 attractive and well-maintained city infrastructure, and 6 efficient, effective, and fiscally responsible government. Some cities say this is a high-performing organization. Whatever word you want to use. I think our group liked that. So let's look at these. There will be a little bit of reading. You have this in front of you.
It'll be on page 2 of this handout right here. It starts on page 2.
Right. So the key strategic outcome number 1 is that so what do your residents expect? They expect Paramount to be a safe community. A safe community. We use the word community to be broader than city, meaning the government, the city, the boundary. Community sometimes may even extend beyond your boundaries. So we said that the goal is Paramount provides a safe place to live, work, and visit, right? The initiative, so the objectives then should be, as you read these, we can walk through them, but as we read these, we know we're a safe city when these things happen, right? These are objectives, these are outcome statements, I meant to that. So you maintain and ensure satisfactory levels of public safety and 911 response through contracts with LA County, Sheriff's Office, provide response to law enforcement emergencies in a timely, effective manner. We know we're safe when that happens. Follow me? That's meant to be an outcome. We know we're safe when we prevent crime when possible through community education. We know we're safe when we prevent fire emergencies through community education, through building permit and code enforcement. We develop and implement emergency preparation, response, and recovery plans associated with natural and man-made disasters and emergencies. Improve community involvement, education, and regional partnerships to increase the level of public trust and to keep the community safe. So there's community education. Meet the expected level of core and specialized law enforcement services as the community grows. So service standards, whether they're officers per 1,000 or response time, or fire often has, I don't know, ours was, I forget, 6 minutes response, 80% of the time, whatever standards that you have, right? We optimize the use of data and technology to improve service, protect mission critical infrastructure, and enhance cybersecurity, which is increasingly an issue. We leverage and improve collaboration with other service agencies to address the prevention of homelessness, improve security and emergency response capabilities at city and facilities and properties. I actually think I missed an indent there. That should be another number there with the capital letter. Just imagine that I did that correctly. That's what happens when you cut and paste from something. So this one would end here, prevention of homelessness. The new number 9, improve security and emergency response capabilities at city facilities and properties so that you have emergency action plans. Improve safety for all modes of travel, including vehicle, pedestrian, bicycles. Use data to focus LA County Sheriff's Department efforts on reducing crime within the community. Maintain gang prevention and suppression programs. So all of those in the aggregate are meant to, we know we're a safe community when those things happen. So again, this is not effort, these are outcomes, right? So and so just picking on safety for a second. When the budget comes forward to you next year, when you're doing city services, all the services, it should, so some of them in public safety or the community safe should fold into those to some measure, right? Not the end all and be all, but it really speaks to safety. The second was community health. And we went round and around with words like quality of life, livability, attractive, those kind of things, but kind of meant on community health, that this is a healthy community, a happy community, those kind of things. So we know it's, and provide diverse recreation, culture, amenities that support healthy lifestyles and a sense of community. So healthy lifestyles and sense of community is one of those things that y'all do. We plan and offer rich variety of recreation programs in response to community needs and desires, and achieve a high degree of participation and satisfaction with program offerings. Not just good enough to offer stuff, but you want people to utilize them, right? We continue to build relationships with the Paramount Unified School District to promote and support higher education. We develop fee structures that are developed based on demand, alternatives, and affordability that improve participation. So we price things right to get people in them. Improve low and moderate income citizen access to and participation with city programs and facilities. So we reach out to people that are very low income. Develop effective marketing strategies that drive optimal attendance and community involvement, so get the word out. Preserve the significant historical character of Paramount community and sense of place. Preserve and provide responsible access to nature. Expand organizational community knowledge about diversity and embrace cultural differences. Foster positive and respectful neighbor relationships and open communication, as well as support conflict resolution. Develop partnerships with youth and community-based organizations to provide programs for the community, so not just what you do, but how you engage others. Provide after-school programs to youth, prevent juvenile crime. Maintain programs and services for seniors that support healthy lifestyles. So this is all that livability, recreation, culture, that type of thing in health.
Mike, I just had a thought.
Yes.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
On number 2 that says continue to build relationships with Paramount Unified School District to promote and support higher education, could we also add community colleges, not just
Sure.
high school perhaps?
Sure.
Wasn't that what higher education
That's right.
is?
To promote higher
It says
education.
that.
Anything beyond high schools.
Right, but I'm talking about the actual partnership.
And I think you're
Build
probably correct me if I'm wrong,
relationships.
but maybe work with community colleges where
Correct.
Paramount,
You know,
Paramount
well,
Kids.
that's
Actually, I'm reading this now as you just
Yeah.
said that. Maybe we should change the last support, not just higher education, but the value of education.
The value.
The value of education at all levels, not just a higher level, but at all levels, right?
All
Technical, it
levels.
could be, yeah.
And
The
we
value
should
of
also
education,
add
how
that.
about,
Right,
how
all
about,
levels.
what about adding, I know I'm thinking off the top of my head, but sometimes you don't know until you're in the middle of talking about it. But both the value of education and lifelong learning,
Yes.
lifelong learning, do we like that?
Yeah.
I like that.
Right.
Okay, Kevin, make it so. You're my great note taker, but, I think that's much better, thanks for that
Well,
comment.
maybe-
Say it
and
again, I'm
then-
sorry, value of, lifelong learning.
Lifelong development,
Lifelong.
I don't know about learning. Development.
Or what was the one that you said before, he said lifelong learning, at all levels?
At all levels, I
At
think
all
is,
levels.
or,
The value of
And just support
education at all
education.
levels?
Support
Just support education.
Support
and
education.
lifelong
That
learning.
you support education, not higher education, but education. Because it doesn't matter if you're a
That's-
fifth grader, it's still
that's a
important.
good point, because we do have the STAR program, so we are, supporting development
At a
education.
younger age.
Yeah, and the city offers things where people learn things. I mean, I don't wanna be, you teach kids to learn to swim. I mean, so it's not the school district doing that, you do that, but it is learning something that makes your life better, or learning and socialization. So learning is more generic, I think that's.
Well, lifelong kind of takes into account too that, we have a very active adult
Yes.
education program.
Right.
So, that's lifelong. Sometimes it's not even about, going to college, it's just about learning English and how to operate a computer. So it's lifelong learning.
So maybe in thinking about that, do you want something that includes the Paramount School District?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say,
Or you could say it's Paramount School District in other ways,
And other ways, is that what
And
you're saying?
other,
Well,
Institutions?
I think that's
or-
important, because I was gonna say, just to bring it to a finer point, I mean, Paramount School District, of course, we wanna have a good relationship
Right.
with, but in addition to that, we also have, you know, other schools.
We could put other learning institutions. or
Yeah, we have
something.
Our Lady of the Rosary, we have,
Yeah.
others that we wanna work with. I
Well,
think.
I'm just thinking out loud, like
Mhm.
Grid Alternatives has a program for vocational learning also.
Vocational
or-
learning,
it
yeah.
could be other opportunities,
That
I mean, it
kind
could be
of-
other opportunities to be more generic. I think that's okay.
Sure.
Rather than an institution even, other opportunities. Because to your point of, I'm, 70 years old and I took a class at the senior center to use, Microsoft Office.
Opportunities for self-development.
Yeah. Do you like development versus lifelong learning, lifelong development? Lifelong learning and development?
Yeah, I have learning/development.
Yeah,
so-
we'll work with that. I like that change. That's good.
And just so you know, number A7, for instance, here's for example, as Mike said, we would use these objectives. You all would keep this in mind when you're approving the budget. Number 7, you may be wondering, well, preserve and provide responsible access to nature. What is that? Well, we have Dills Park, so that's one of the things. We have a YMCA, Camp Oaks, where we send kids up to camp. So as you're adopting the budget, you're thinking in those terms. Okay, how are we preserving and providing responsible access to nature? So
I would even add to that, I think,
Example.
this is probably way back, but more of my artist background, but the whole notion of nature deficit syndrome is this whole, that kids growing up today don't have that same access to nature as that you and I did when we were growing up. And so a lot of times kids don't as easily get outdoors on their own that they did. And so sometimes learning to discover nature is just part of growing up. It happened naturally when I was growing up, but now it's harder and harder, So those are some things that I think might, support that goal. So in this notion of, so as you look at these strategic outcomes, these are meant to speak to livability, quality of life, recreation, culture, opportunities. Anything else? I like the changes we made on the school district thing. Anything else that sort of jumps out at you that wasn't covered? Or anything else you spend a whole lot of money on? This is another way to look at this. Anything else the city spends money on that promotes livability, quality of life, parks, recreation, culture, education, community involvement? Well, not community involvement, that's a little broader, that's a different thing. But anything else that you're doing?
They're keeping the seniors alive by shipping them all over the place.
Shipping them
Your
around.
excursions.
There are some
Excursions.
Different trips.
On
Field trips.
Well, I think, access, access and availability is a key issue, right? And the other thing I would, Kevin, can you make a note? I may want to add this. If you just bear with me and they'll forget. One of the things that I think that any good city should do is promote what I would call self-directed leisure. Meaning that you invite people to, it's a person that jogs through your park in the middle of the morning that didn't sign up, didn't register, didn't go anywhere, but partly to educate the community about the places and spaces that they can recreate on their own. To go fly a kite or those kind of things. And so just make a note somewhere to, maybe we would add the notion of self-directed leisure, because I think, to your point, the way that you stay healthy is sometimes organized stuff, right? But sometimes it's just going for a walk. And how you promote, these are the safe places to go for a walk in Paramount, right? That are good.
Because very often, we're so invested, of course, in our children and the
Right.
future and youth. I know I've heard that more than once, that seniors feel a little left out of things. I was just wondering if on number 10, we maybe couldn't change that to add, develop partnerships with youth and seniors and, youth, seniors and community-based organizations. And that way, you're not left behind. It's all about developing
Sure.
programs for you in the community. Because yes, you have the youth and you have the community, but seniors are in kind of a box by themselves too.
Yeah, and maybe this one, Kevin, number 10, number 12, let's just move it up on the list. Let's
Oh, I'm
move-
sorry, I didn't.
No, but I think that's a point. It gets lost if it's down there. And so maybe this is also plan and promote,
Mm.
not just
Instead of
maintain,
maintain,
plan and promote programs and opportunities and services, right?
You know, going on that, Peggy, though, we should always think about too, because we always talk about young and seniors. What about our middle-aged? You know,
Yeah.
we always talk about youth and seniors, and we're missing that adult.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know if
You
we
know what I
can
mean?
find
So
a
it's
word
like, how do
that
we-
Well,
encompasses
I'll
all
find
three
some,
or
just
families,
make a
I
note,
don't
know.
we'll
But I
turn,
didn't
just
really
programs and
read it.
opportunities at all ages.
All
So
All
we'll,
ages, all inclusive. There's your word.
Rich Right programs and response, just for people of all ages, in the number one. I would just add the word all ages to number one.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
add number one.
That'd be good.
All ages.
Yeah. Great. Yes, Lori, you wanna say something?
I was thinking too, when we're talking about the, development for, activities for either youth or seniors or anybody in between, and then nature goes into it as well. You know what would be nice, and when I was a kid growing up here in Paramount, you could catch a bus and take you straight to the beach. So maybe to have like senior days or just buses available to take somebody directly to like, El Dorado Park for nature, to do the nature walk. We'll drop off at this time, we'll have a pickup at this time, and you do your own thing, but you could walk,
Yeah. Do you
put your
have,
bike on a bike
Right.
rack and do the El Dorado Park thing, because it's still, we may not have a lot of nature. I know we have Dills Park, but it's near the riverbed, so.
is El Dorado Park one of your parks?
No.
No, it's not.
But it's a
So
lo-
it
it's a
could be
bigger
an
local park?
Nature park, it's a nature park.
Do you guys do transit?
We used to, but we, through Long Beach Transit.
Do you
we
partner
contract
with
that.
transit?
I'll turn that over to Dave to
Do you
explain
partner
what we
with
do.
transit?
Part of the transit, and we do excursions, and we rent buses, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Still
to
do-
Lori,
Bring in
I
the
just-
nature,
I-
bring in the
you could
nature.
explore this, but we had we did transit, but
Mhm.
we had a rec bus. You had a summer rec pass that kids could buy, that there was a route that would take them to all the pools and parks.
Yeah.
It was just a summer thing, and it was cheap. I mean, it's like you buy a pass for $10, gets you all over town for $10. It was just a summer thing to get kids to the pools and parks. But we made it easy because sometimes lack of transportation or lack of safe transportation, right? That was that. So, transit, summer rec bus at that. Okay, this is good. All right. All
Mike,
right. Yes.
so,
But are we getting in, just a question, which direction on this? I think Ms. Gillen's suggestion is an excellent one, but aren't we looking at big picture things, not specific programs?
Right, so maybe the language would be facilitate or transportation options are available without, without trying to commit to what those would be. But I think access, I mean, that's the same access for seniors to get to your center, right? I mean, that whole.
That's what I'm saying, if we start breaking it down, I just don't know that you can stay big picture like, and maybe
Right.
that comes up in planning and goal
Yeah.
setting for things that we wanna do.
So, yeah, but that type of thing might influence a budget thing, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I hear what you're saying. So try to keep it a little more broad and generic and more outcome oriented versus the means.
Next, there might be 10 more,
Right.
ideas that go with
Yes.
transportation,
Right.
and that could be one of them, so just don't wanna pigeonhole anything, but I
No.
certainly like that specific idea, but I just thought of
Right.
this as being a more broad statement.
No, and sometimes like, as I jump to kind of the means versus the ends, right?
Yeah.
But I think the notion of accessible, access to places and programs and spaces.
As an objective,
As
yes.
is an important objective.
Right.
Because you can have all the good stuff in the world, but if people can't get there, whether they're seniors or adults or kids, that's a deterrent. And more, that's a huge deterrent when, neighborhood parks, you can't walk to them without crossing a busy street, or I can't, only people have so many centers and so many pools or some things like that. So access, I think the whole notion of access fits in here somewhere.
Yeah.
I'll noodle on that,
I
all right?
agree.
Okay, and you can help me doodle, all right?
Mike,
Yes.
so, can you
Back up?
Yeah. What about as a component of community health, special events or community events? Because I think
Oh.
we do a lot of that here. It's a huge
So
part
community
of
events
what
that
we
create
do.
sense of place?
Well, it creates a sense of place, it creates a sense of pride.
Yeah,
And, you know, that, I think that has an effect on community branding.
good, I think that's a good ad.
And, you know, many other things. I think, you know, it's not really a tangible thing, but when you have great community events, special events that, you know, you remember as a kid, which creates pride, you know, in where you live, I think that has something to do with, you know, the overall community's health.
Like the Santa train.
That's very
No, I-
true.
Up.
That's very
It's
true.
I think you create community and sense of place by offering events that causes the community to get together. I mean, I think, yes, I think that's a great ad on this.
I mean, you know, just as an example, you know, we have the Santa train that you're hearing about. And, you know, every single year that I've gone on the Santa train, inevitably, somebody has come up to me, a resident that I don't know, has said, you know, I came to these events when I was this small, and now I bring my kids who are this small.
Right.
You know, so it's a generational thing.
And, you know, events can be, you know, economic development engines. I mean, I'm not suggesting, but I did the business plan for the city of Dublin, Northern California. Don't kid yourself, the St. Patrick's Day Festival is a gigantic thing, sort of like the Rose Parade. So that sometimes those things bring people to your community, that's not just creating community, right? Community, fostering community relationships and sense of place. It can bolster the economy. Events that happen in the downtown puts people in the stores, right? So.
We have some great
Yeah, that.
adjectives in number one.
I was
that
just
you
gonna say,
can
yeah,
add
number
to
one.
that plan and offer rich variety of events and recreational programs or recreational programs and events.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That was a great ad. Okay. Okay, economic health. So broad spectrum, what are you doing to support the business community, the economic growth, the economic prosperity of places, support a healthy, sustainable economy reflecting community values? Okay. And that notion of reflecting community values is, that word, I put that in intentionally because it's sort of like community values. These are the kind of businesses we want to have in town that reflect our values. There could be other kind of things that said, yeah, we're not really interested in that, right? Because this is who we are. And frankly, this fits Paramount more than it might fit some other city. So community values, you think about that. So these are good fit businesses, these are not so good fit businesses, right? So that you go on. So you want to maintain, and we know we're successful in the economy or economic health, and we maintain and grow diverse employment. So you have employment opportunities, enhance business engagement to address an existing emergency business needs, so that you listen and to that segment of the community. Foster infill and redevelopment that enhances the community where those opportunities exist. Invest in utility infrastructure in line with community development and maintain water utility system services infrastructure and predictable rates. So part of any kind of business is, you know, the fact that utilities are available and affordable. Align economic health goals and strategies across all levels of the organization and refine and agree upon economic tools and city uses to attract and retain businesses. Improve policies and programs to retain, expand, incubate, and attract primary employers consistent with city goals. So what kind of businesses you want to bring to your town? Support workforce development to retain and attract jobs and community amenities initiatives that meet the needs of employers in the city. In particular, I would tell you that one thing. The number one growth thing that's happening in businesses in this country, in California, is small business, right? Small business. And the number one factor that encourages small businesses to locate or relocate is quality of life.
Is what?
Quality of life. Quality of life. As opposed to a big, you know, in our town we had HP, NEC. They have different kinds of things because they're big employers. But small businesses really look at quality of life because the business owner says, "Is this a community I want to live in?" Right? And that really becomes important. So that was a little bit of that. Improve effectiveness through collaboration with economic health-oriented regional partners. So, gosh, what's in our neck of the woods? We have like SACOG, the Sacramento Council of Governments. What would be
A gateway cloud.
yeah,
Exactly.
those kind of partners that you do with sustain high water quality to support community and water dependent businesses, Collaborate and support the Chamber of Commerce in promoting economic development and a strong business climate in Paramount. Anything else on the, so what, A, what do you think about those broadly? And then B, is there anything missing, or do you wanna, kinda like we did with the last group, anything we wanna change around?
Is that okay, Leslie?
I would rather just work through the mayor, just, I don't wanna step on anybody's toes, but do you wanna, how we, as we pass, wanna encourage participation?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's would be a good
Yeah.
idea, sure.
I would just ask this, cause that's normal in council
As
meetings.
long as
too.
it's all related, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Is that okay?
sure.
Yeah.
I would just say number 4, you know, we talk about alternative transportation, and what I really think as a resident that's lacking, and we're, you know, looking at sustainability and parking issues, is bikes. We don't, I would like to see more promotion of bike riding, but it's just not safe in Paramount to ride bikes right now. So I would think at number 4, we could maybe add something about developing, bike lanes or some.
Are you on the
more-
economic
Are you
health?
gonna come out?
Yeah.
Are you back
Oh,
on the
no, oh,
community
sorry.
health?
No, you're on.
Okay, sorry, I'm number 5.
Number 5.
Oh, this is me, okay, sorry.
All right, hold that thought then.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? All right, that's okay. Yes. Lauren.
I would think if there was anywhere, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, if there was somewhere in there or something that I'm not really reading, because now after 50 minutes, I'm kind of glossing over everything. My attention span is short. Is there something in there that we could do, because it says supporting healthy, sustainable economy reflecting community values? I think the community wants transparency, and I think that there's somewhere that we could do, consistency, and I know we have a website that gives, you know, what our water values are and our air quality, but I think when people don't have answers to certain things, they fill in the blanks. And when they fill in the blanks, that's misinformation.
Mhm.
So I think just something where we continuously update our community on issues that are important.
Okay, hold that very thought to the last slide about efficient, effective government.
Okay.
Because that's more how you do business,
Okay.
right? This is more what you do to promote the business climate, if you will, in Paramount. And so I think you need to be
But on the
inclusive and
business
engaging.
climate, if I wanna bring in my business and I'm filling in the blanks thinking, wow, I don't know if this is the best place, maybe it's not the safest place, maybe burglaries are really high, maybe the water quality isn't good, and I'm gonna be making, preparing food with the water. These are things I wanna know before I come in to develop my business here.
Right, I think that could, what you just said, could fit in number 5.
Okay.
How you go about promoting your city, what's a good fit, what information, you know, I think I asked John, do you guys have an economic development strategic plan? Do you?
Not
Does one
a,
exist?
not a
formal?
strategic plan, we have a program.
Okay, so those kind of things, so this speaks to goals and strategies, so yes, you do that, but I think those are sort of those typical instruments where you sort of say, in our economic development strategic plan, these are, this is how we wanna promote our community.
So
Right.
then maybe we need a strategic plan.
That would be a means to an end, right? But I think this speaks to that they're using words, that you have some sort of strategies. Okay, let's move on just for the sake of, and we'll take a break that we walk through all these. So the number 4, environmental health, the goal would be promote, protect, and enhance healthy and sustainable built and natural environment. Number 1, demonstrate progress towards achieving energy and water conservation measures within the community. Number 2, engage citizens in ways to educate and change behavior towards more sustainable living practices. 3, increase communities' resiliency and preparedness for changes in climate, weather, and resource availability. We in Northern California have to figure out how to keep the power on.
Yeah.
Demonstrate progress towards achieving waste management goals within the community and city organization. Continually improve environmental regulatory collaboration as needed. Promote, protect, and enhance healthy and sustainable environment, especially air and water quality. Provide high-quality, sustainable water supply that meets or exceeds all public health standards and supports a healthy and safe community. Monitor existing air samplers in the city to assure acceptable levels of air quality and notify AQMD, who is AQMD?
Air quality management.
Oh, thank you. Have any concerns? Assure compliance with state and local stormwater regulations to maintain water quality in rainstorms and produce runoffs. Identify and implement measures and systems to improve energy efficiency at city facilities. It's a lot. And we borrowed, to be fair, I looked at like 3 or 4 other strategic plans with other cities, and I stole good stuff from everybody that seemed like it might fit. Again, is there anything either missing or you want to add to or expand or enhance any of these kind of outcomes? Is there anything you don't think is appropriate? I mean, that's maybe the start point, like, well, we shouldn't do that. Or is there something else you should do relative to environmental health?
We can always add later, right?
Yes, yes, I mean, part of it today. Now, the one thing I would say, Lori, is that at some point they could get, we talked about it ideally, because sometimes we might even synthesize these. I think in terms of a document, if it gets more than 12, 13, 14, 15, it gets a little unwieldy. And so, there's nothing magic about that, but I think that there's sometimes it's a good thing to kind of keep it fairly consistent.
I was just thinking number 8, monitoring existing air samplers throughout the city. I would like to see, monitor existing and putting more monitors of what we already have, because we're very limited. So if there could, instead of saying monitor existing air samplers, at this point, I would say just monitor air samplers, not existing, because in the future,
Oh.
I'd like to see about adding.
Yeah,
Okay.
take out existing, you never know
Right.
where we're gonna go.
Yeah, actually, I think if I was to rewrite that again as a outcome, it would be air
Monitor
samplers are monitored.
throughout the city.
That's an outcome. Air samplers are monitored. I need to wordsmith that a little bit.
You know
Yeah.
what, you have the words up there, promote, I'm sorry,
Good.
promote, protect, and enhance. So are we saying promote is the same as educate?
Mhm.
Is that how, because I mean, when you say promote, I'm thinking of marketing or promoting, but when you say education, that's a different word to me. Because I think we need
Both.
to
I think it
educate.
encompasses both.
I
don't
think,
know if
I think
does
promote,
to me.
education is largely to inform.
Right.
Promotion would be to encourage.
Right, it's different
Right?
to me.
They are different.
So when we're talking about these environmental health, I think we need to put something in there, that we should educate.
Educate and encourage, or educate and promote? Would that be educate and promote?
I just think
Yeah.
promote, we need to,
And keep, protect, and enhance.
yeah, those, I'm just saying, promoting and educating to me is 2 different words.
Hmm.
Yeah, because
Okay.
educate,
Yeah.
fill in the blanks.
We can do that. Some of these I need to just, change the language so it's more of an outcome statement as opposed to a we're doing versus we've achieved. So those are things, good suggestion.
Mike, we use the word sustainable, at least a couple times in this. I wonder if we need to be more specific about like maybe something like carbon neutral.
Do you think?
Because I mean, we talk about like air and water, pollution related things, but when it comes to sustainability, it's about like greenhouse gases.
Yeah, and our carbon footprint.
Being carbon neutral.
So where would you add that?
Or you talk about like replacing sustainable.
Well, or just
Kind of
sustainable.
qualifying it more?
Yeah, qualifying it more.
Do you see that's more engage citizens' way to educate, change behavior towards sustainable living practices that are carbon neutral?
Yeah, along those
That
lines.
are like that?
And it might go under number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I just read that. Oh, increase.
Climate,
Cognizance of our carbon footprint, something like that. too.
Yeah. Okay, maybe add that to number 3.
Uh-huh.
Okay, good. I think particularly if there's a reference point, that's always good to use, right? Because when we do measurements and metrics, that'll be helpful. All right, we're almost at the finish line here. Attractive and well-maintained city infrastructure. We want to develop, the goal would be develop and maintain city-owned infrastructure, parks, facilities, and amenities that enhance the quality of life and attractiveness of the community. So what you want, direct and guide growth in community through appropriate planning, annexation, land use, and development review process. City parks and trails are planned, designed, implemented, and maintained so they are safe, clean, attractive, and well utilized. We develop effective operation maintenance funding alternatives for city subsidized facilities and programs. Plan and design, implement park and recreation trail improvements, level the service ends, that makes sense. Trail improvements, according to, can you add that?
Maybe that's where Cindy's
Yeah.
component can go in about bikes, is under, well, maintain city infrastructures, is.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, sorry.
Kevin, can you add the word consistent here, consistent with level of service standards? Number 4. And I'm sorry, I missed that last thought. What was?
She had been, oh, go ahead, Brenda.
No, I was just saying, where Cindy was talking about bike trails or bike access.
Oh, yeah.
Bike
Access,
lanes.
things.
Yeah.
We have cities, parks, and trail systems are planned. So cities, parks, and trails, you wanna add word, we could add, trails could be passive trails, or it could be bike trails. Would you wanna add bike trails and trail and nature trail?
I think you want, just access,
Are-
like citywide, access. for
Citywide trails.
Oh.
Do we wanna say bikes, or just say provide for alternative forms of transportation, so it's very broad?
So it's broad
Well, it's
based.
trails though.
No,
Do you want-
it's
do you want-
do you want
lane.
trails
Or
or-
lanes.
Bike paths aren't trails.
No.
Not
Yeah,
necessarily trails, just like you have to have like a lot of racks to put a bike when
And
you
bike-
go in.
right.
So,
like,
the question is, do we wanna add
Bike
something
friendly.
about alternative transportation
Bike
Multimodal.
friendly.
that encourages,
Multimodal.
as a
Multimodal
multimodal?
forms of transportation.
Let's just add one, let's
Yeah.
add one for that, I think that's good.
Add a new one.
I add a new one to
A multi-
promote alternative
I like it as
transportation.
multimodal.
Yeah.
multi.
So multimodal would be
Multimodal. So it could be
Buses,
a walking
different
trail,
modes.
a
Oh,
biking
mode,
trail.
I didn't hear that.
Multimodal.
Yeah,
It
multimodal.
doesn't sound.
I wouldn't want bike trails to get lost in multimodal though.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can stay both,
Well,
right?
Can you
That's,
ever
that's just
put
sort of
in
a
parentheses like
transportation lingo.
examples?
I know,
I
but
mean,
partly,
Yeah, that's it.
partly, you know, what I always think if somebody that's not,
Keep it simple.
part of the city lingo, that somebody that the citizen can pick this up and read it and understand it. So when you use words like, even like, I don't particularly like the word infrastructure because it just sounds really government speak. But it is a understood word. So whenever we should speak in plain language so that an everyday person can read like, I get it, right? So, we were looking at something about net zero something yesterday when we made a net, and I'm like, I don't know what.
Who knows?
So I think it's okay to use both, but I think I would say, encourage bike trails, trails and other, alternative forms of transportation. People will get that, right?
Active transportation.
Anything else? Good add. So that'll be a new one. We're only at 10, we got room for 2. There's nothing magic about it.
Mike,
Yeah.
I'm over here, sorry. But if we use bike, and I'm just kind of piggybacking on what you said, that people pick it up and then we'll have people complain like, why are you guys so focused on bike trails when I like to ride my rollerblades? and then you get into that whole, that you need to be inclusive. And we have avid bike riders, but then we also have other people that like other recreational sports that we have to include. So if we just use trails versus bike trails.
Well, I'm smiling because in some, you have all those sort of like rental bikes and the little scooters that people can take around town.
Not yet.
Like, you know, I was in Long Beach last night.
Yeah, Long
And
Beach
big
was
cities
fun.
are all over the place.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit to your point. I mean, at some point, they're sort of a blessing and a curse, right? Because they just get left everywhere. Let's think about that, right? I think that alternative transportation and bike trails, which could also be jogging, walking trails, as alternative transportation is clearly understood, and
Skateboarders.
yeah, sure.
Could it just be generic, like encourage alternative modes of transportation that reduce the carbon footprint?
Yes, we'll work on.
And then-
Kevin, you will work with me on this.
In his last week, he's
In
gonna.
your last week, can you write this outcome?
Can I clarify something? I didn't mean trails like in a park. I meant
No, on the
bike
street.
lanes. So
On the
I think
street.
alternative forms of transportation is more what I meant. as far as in the street.
So class 1, class 2, class 3.
Yeah, class two.
Yeah, as far as, right, you know, alternative forms of transportation in the street, as far as transportation, not like a trail in the park.
Yes, I get it,
Okay.
yes.
So
You
less
mean lanes on- you mean
recreational
lanes on the
and
street.
Yes.
Alternative form
Yeah,
of
if
transportation.
you drive around the streets and you, in Long Beach, and Long Beach is a very bike-friendly city.
Yes.
I wonder why the
And
manager.
there is,
Pat.
all the time you drive down these streets, you never see anybody in the bike lane. Never. I don't ever see anybody in the bike lanes.
Well, it's coming, maybe.
They're
planning for the future.
Yes, I think sometimes there's a good fit or not, but also there's other good reasons, you know, in terms of say past the schools.
Yeah.
That trails are a good thing. So I think it's a good thing to speak to. I mean, we'll move on. You'll get another bite at this apple when we figure it out. But I think we've got a good one to add that speaks to that. All right, lastly, then we're gonna take a break. So, our last goal, efficient, effective, and fiscally responsible government. Deliver an efficient, effective city government that is fiscally responsible, transparent, and collaborative. So the objective is maintain a balanced budget, adequately funds core services, and addresses revenue requirements to meet known and emerging needs. Promote a values-driven organizational culture that reinforces ethical behavior, exercises, and maintains the public trust to accountable and transparent budgeting and fiscally responsible services. Expand and enhance city services that facilitate public engagement, outreach, and two-way communication. Improve organizational capability and operational effectiveness to provide consistent, high-quality services that are responsive to community needs and priorities. Optimize the use of technology to drive efficiency and productivity and improve services. Proactively influence public policy, regulations, legislation that affects the city. Leverage data, technology, metrics, and benchmarks to guide decisions, improve results, and enhance services. Maintain assets to reduce life cycle costs while improving reliability and accessibility. Attract, retain, engage, develop a diverse and competitive workforce and meet the needs of the community now and in the future. Maintain adequate reserves for emergencies and economic challenges. Leverage resource capacity through partnerships and collaboration. Continue to work with the League of Cities and identify pension reform measures that produce acceptable and sustainable retirement benefits for city employees. Anything, Laura, you mentioned, this is where I said, hold your thought about inclusive.
Mhm.
So as you look over that, in those objectives, where would you,
I don't know, maybe I can answer that after I eat something.
maybe,
Food's here.
maybe it'd be inclusive public engagement, right? And number
Yes.
3, inclusive public engagement.
Sure.
All right. Anything, I know we're upstanding for us now. So, anything missing here in terms of if you're a well-run city, you're a high-performing city, the organization's running well, any other outcomes that we're missing? We're talking about
You talk
outreach,
about
education.
communication.
Huh?
You talk about communication
Yeah.
in number
3.
3.
Expand and enhance city services to facilitate inclusive public engagement, outreach, and two-way communication.
So when I read two-way communication, it kind of sounds like, you know, we're having a dialogue with the community. Versus
Yeah.
I think there's a communication aspect where we're putting out information. I think somebody mentioned it.
Oh.
Putting out information to the public. So communicating in that way versus just, you know, a dialogue.
Yeah, just
Maybe
public
something-
and two-way communication.
Maybe something that speaks to
And.
proactively communicate with community through public information, marketing, branding,
Yeah.
something along that lines,
Yeah.
as an ad. Do you understand what, I mean, I'm not writing this now, I'm just trying to think, what you're saying is, part of what good cities do is share information in a timely and an effective way that says, this is what's going on,
Yes.
right?
Not feeling
That's what you were saying, or you got an event coming up, so this event's happening, right? Okay, anything, good ad.
Okay, yes.
Anything else? Look it over, think about it, get a snack.
We actually have a full lunch available right over there, so, and that includes members of the public, obviously, help yourself. So what, Mike, how many minutes do you want to break for?
Do you wanna just take a
It's-
5-minute break and then we'll just walk?
It's 11:30 now,
No, not
so,
Get your food and keep going.
yeah.
10
so-
minutes, 15?
15.
15?
Yeah, 15 would,
Okay.
that'll give you enough time to use the restroom or whatever. And
I think we've got about maybe 20 minutes left or 30 minutes left. and
30
then-
minutes left?
And then maybe then next steps. We'll talk about next steps.
Okay.
That'll be good.
How many sections are there? So there's this one, next step.
All that's left is we're gonna talk about, I'm just gonna walk through the SWOT analysis real quick.
Okay.
And then talk about how you all wanna go move forward with edits or additions. And additions of ones we've identified today. And then what we're gonna do to come back to finalize this process.
Where did you get these from, these objectives? You guys can go, I'm just like,
I was an amalgamation of about a dozen different strategic plans, some that I've written myself for other agencies, and some that came from the group, very specifically came from the group. So we sent and they sent edits back and we wrote it,
if
so.
I can reference, I'm gonna reference and cite, I'm gonna use it.
So we referenced, and some of them came from the staff. I mean, you all wrote those and added those, so,
That's fine.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, this meeting will recess for
15
15 minutes, and we'll reconvene at that point in time, which would be 11:45.
Perfect.
Okay, our city council meeting will now reconvene after our short intermission.
So I was thinking as we take this last little bit, the reason that we shared the information on the environmental scan and the SWOT analysis is in terms of as you look forward, in terms of the issues facing the city, or you look forward to the Paramount Way, for example, those start to inform things like values or your vision and those type of things. So as you think about that, the SWOT analysis or the external environmental things starts to inform, we need to address or respond to these kinds of things, right? So it kind of helps give us clues about what we should include. So I want to walk through this, I'm going to do it quickly and then we'll talk about next steps and we'll finish up. So what are the things that how many people have ever done a SWOT? Everybody done a SWOT analysis? I don't think I explain it too much, right? But think about what your strengths, what helps you accomplish your mission and vision, and what do you depend on to be successful, right, as an organization. So the group, we talked about strengths, good, educated, dedicated staff, institutional knowledge and experience with the city, communication, easy, abundant, and accessible, good team, cohesive team, shared goals, strong leadership, good loyalty in the city, the Paramount Way. All those things we talked about in the Paramount Way should be really perceived as a strength, and responsive and open to change. So as you as council members or staff again, as you think, what do you think the strengths of the city are? Is there anything in here that's missing on this list? Or look, you have this list in your handout too.
What's another word for open? Like, I don't wanna say innovative, but like, let's say when we go to Dave Johnson and there's an idea, he's open to the idea, so there's another word to use.
Flexible?
Maybe
Receptive?
receptive, there's something that
Receptive
the
to change?
city has strengths is like,
Responsive and
There.
I was
receptive.
gonna say manipulable.
yeah, that. But I mean, there's a, I don't know the word off the.
So responsive,
I
responsive,
think what you're saying is
responsive
receptive,
and open to change, receptive.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Receptive.
Receptive, maybe?
Yeah.
It's responsive,
How
receptive,
about
or.
just responsive and receptive
Mhm.
and
to
open.
change and new ideas?
Sure.
And just change, and just add the word receptive, change, and new ideas, right?
I'm gonna use Dave as an example.
Yeah.
But you guys are all like that.
Any other
We're
strengths
open.
missing?
And just so you know, everybody, we're following along.
Right.
This is the page, it's page 3 in the handout, so if you want to
Could you
follow.
go back
Yeah.
just a second?
Go back a slide, you said.
No, this one.
There.
Where was that?
That one?
Here.
Oh.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Weaknesses are things that hold you back, that inherit your ability to not accomplish your mission and vision And, you know, other ways, these are things around here we gotta fix, right? These are things that are a little bit broken, we gotta fix. It's not working as well as it could. So, the group, in the 2 meetings we had, because we added to this, or just to this, lack of funding for maintaining operations, not having all the resources that you need and want. People felt that the city could be better at public information or sharing information, be more proactive in giving information out, what's going on in the city. So the intent was we gotta get better at public information, better at branding, better at marketing the program, services, and facilities of the city. That's the intent of that. Sometimes unclear expectations. I'm not quite sure what we're trying to accomplish, or mixed messages that happen, right? So mixed messages in terms of accomplishing your vision. Now, mixed messages can come from the council, mixed messages can come from staff, can come from the manager, can come from the community, right? Those kinds of things that happen, right? And sometimes you as council should understand this as well, because when you go back to what matters most, sometimes in every community that has, you know, council form of government manager, sometimes it's the loudest voice that you hear may not represent the community consensus. You know, that sometimes the tail wags the dog. And so just be mindful of that, you know, that opinion might be important. So like, let me give you a clear example that everybody understands. So we were doing a comprehensive master plan, right? And the number one thing that people wanted to do on Parks and Recreation were trails. I mean, trails. And if you do any survey of any community on Parks and Recreation in the country, trails pop to the number 1 on the list. Like with a bullet, 99% of people want more trails, right? Not maybe about 90, but 90%. Except if they're in your backyard, right? Except if it's in your backyard. And so both are valid. Both are valid points of view, right? But sometimes it's sort of the needs of the many are different. So that was unclear expectations. David, you talked about lack of play fields and open space. So places and spaces for, is it mostly organized athletics or just in general?
It's both.
That
We don't have places for organized sports for adults, not enough for kids, and we don't have general open space.
just the need to have open space and parks in the community.
Yeah, I mean, even when we do program youth sports, I mean, it takes up a lot of that park, and if you just wanna go out and kick a soccer ball around, you can't, cause it's being taken up by baseball.
Right, right. And, you know, one of the other things that happened, I mean, when I grew up, you know, there was sort of baseball season and soccer season. And then now they just overlap. It's just crazy. And then the need to be more appropriate and respectfully assertive with misinformation that challenges credibility or facts. So this was one of those things that sometimes if it's just set out in the ether of the universe, or somebody says something at a council meeting or something that's just known to be untrue, that I think the message was that staff should say to correct that misinformation, right? Because sometimes it has a way of taking on a life of its own.
Mike,
Yeah.
I thought we had discussed like also, staff or employee recruitment or retention because of the change, the mistrust in the public or as government employees that we're now facing, that new generations do not want to become government employees.
Oh,
Almost
so
like
the
the
notion
sheriff's
about
department.
people not wanting to get involved with government
Become a government
because
employee.
it has a little bit of a, I don't want to say stigma, but it may have a little bit of a, do I want to get into that universe? As opposed to
Exactly.
private sector. Yeah,
And I think that's what the sheriff's department or any law enforcement agencies also encountering, that there's not a lot of people wanting to go into that field. And I think we're starting to see that as government employees too, that not a lot of people want to come into local government.
that's actually true in terms of succession planning in all government. It's sort of people wanting to work for government, people are a little bit reluctant now. But in particular, certain kinds of, in particular, certain kinds of high-profile positions, I don't want to be a cop because I don't want to have somebody videotaping me at every stop I make. There's that kind of thing. So certain positions, much more than others, right?
Right.
More so in law enforcement than let's say fire, public safety, different, you know, there are different perceptions, about that, right? So Kevin, you're over there and you're not writing my notes, you're like my guy. John, we'll add that, right, sort of just,
I got it, thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of like how much transparency is kind of almost discouraging people.
So people are reluctant to get into the public sector and in certain jobs because of the scrutiny and
Right.
or negative bias.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
There was actually just a program on about that, how social media is changing the national dialogue. And forgive me, any Republicans in the room, but, you know, with the Trump situation and all of the misinformation that's out there, that it is literally changing the whole face and dialogue of government, because there are no rules on the books on how to combat, you know, the information that's out there, whether you believe it's true or it's false. There's no way to shut down the false.
Yeah, and the whole universe of, gosh, I mean, even think things that were created with best intentions, like, you guys have Nextdoor and
Yeah.
Nextdoor,
Yeah.
or those things, and what happens is the people that are engaged in that, either have a particular interest to do that they wanna share. But I just wonder, does it represent the dominant view? Because the dominant view, because I don't ever post anything. Even though I might be concerned, I don't live my life out loud that way. So, no, but I think that's a good, I think that speaks to your issue. All right, so, before I left it, any other weaknesses?
Yes.
Any other weaknesses of the organization? Yes, Peggy.
If it fits in this category, we need a solid retail tax base or tax generating base. We do not have sufficient tax dollars.
So the need would be to bolster.
Our weakness as a city is part of that we have no reliable.
Are you talking about sales tax or property tax or?
Well, we're almost a zero property tax city, so I would say
Yeah.
sales
We're
tax.
low and low.
So, low on sales tax.
Well, yeah, or flat, if you will, I think that's a better way to describe it.
Yeah.
And as far, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We have a huge sales tax leakage in the city. And we also need to diversify the base of our sales tax, just so it's more stable in our income.
The weakness.
Speak up, I can't hear again what you're saying.
We have sales leakage in the city.
Yes.
Apparent, we have talked about it for ages.
Yes.
And another thing is, diversifying the sales tax base.
Right.
That's another major thing that we need to work on, because we heavily rely on fuels.
Right, so you would agree, it's a weakness, right?
So sales tax flat or declining, or is it
And
declining?
non-diversified?
It's not declining, but it's
A
very
revenue
flat.
diversity?
Yeah, it's very flat.
Lack of revenue diversity in sales tax and it's declining,
It's flat.
flat? Okay.
Flat, yeah.
All right, yeah? Okay, save that thought, well, a new thought on opportunities, right? Okay, so what are the opportunities to take advantage of? What should you consider doing to improve your strengths? So you want to build on your strengths. So the group said reinvent, retool parks, and actually maybe get new parks. I mean, if you have a shortage of land, you need to find some way to, I know that's hard. and
Yeah, we're working on that.
city, difficult.
With mandates on housing units, and
Yeah.
not gonna happen.
Okay, well, I don't know, maybe there's infill or something, I don't know. I mean, but I don't wanna go that go unsaid, I mean, if that's a weakness, you need to sort of, how can we creatively find new land?
Go
Yes,
up.
And we're working on that.
I'm not saying go out and find 200 acres, but, you know, maybe there's
In the places where we have created additional park space, it's come with strings from where we get the funding sources or the agency like SE. You can't do certain things under power lines.
Yeah.
It limits what we can do.
Or private property, like the pocket parks. It's
Right.
created some open space, but you can't put play.
I'm not trying to solve the issue, but I think we're not
We
alone.
agree
and-
with you, there's an opportunity to reinvent, retool.
Right, all right, strategic partners that leverage capacity, you know, opportunities, so, could be from school districts, other groups, or public-private partnerships, anything, those are the opportunities. Leadership Paramount was just, I was shared, I'm involved with 2 different leadership communities. These are run by the Chamber of Commerce, and it's designed, it's sponsored by the Chamber, designed to encourage people to get involved in the leadership of their community. So in the ones, Leadership Roseville, that I'm on the steering committee for, people apply with the Chamber. They're all walks of life, private sector, some people from the public sector. They learn about their community. There's a heavy dose of learning about their city, but also the school districts, the county, nonprofits. It goes for 9 months, good part of one day. It's about to educate. And our city created that, and I just got involved with the new town of Loomis, where my home is to encourage people to get involved in local government or running their city. And so it's a great template. It's almost all over California. I think it'd be great for Paramount. But encourage people to get involved,
Is
right?
that written down somewhere?
I have the brochure that I printed out when he mentioned that to me on my desk.
Yeah, he was gonna
so-
go meet with Barbara. and
Yeah.
Yeah,
set the opportunity.
it's a great thing to, and our city started it when we couldn't find enough people to be commissioners and board members and council members 25 years ago. And now there's like 700 graduates. I mean, they're the people that always apply to get involved, but they're informed with their community. So
And it's kind of like a boot camp, if you will. How does
Mentor
a city
program or boot-
work?
okay, boot camp.
Yeah, how does a city work? They go over the budget,
Right.
they go over everything, how a city functions, what are the responsibilities, what are the other government agencies out there, what their responsibilities are.
Yeah, and they're around. I mean, there's Leadership Sacramento, Rockland, Roseville, Leadership, it's a fairly common thing. Sometimes, but mostly they're run by the Chamber, right? State grants was an opportunity, all grants, inventory to avoid duplication. This might be to look at both services, as I understand, services that we do, where is there overlap or duplication of services, that we could find out where that exists. Organizational development, succession planning, management academies, those type of things to grow talent in your workforce. That's where that came from, right? Any other opportunities that we talked about? What was the one I said? Hold that
Revenue
thought.
diversity.
Huh?
Different revenue sources.
Oh, diversify other city funding sources, revenue sources. And that could be from, often it's either sales tax, property tax, or fees for service, just maybe a comprehensive fee analysis or things like that exist. And maybe we should put down sales tax initiative
Under opportunities?
opportunities.
Sure.
Sales tax initiative.
Sales tax initiative.
All right. Last thing, threats or challenges overcome to be successful, mitigate or thrive in the future, upcoming changes, status quo. Threats, political instability, both locally and state and national, right? Instability affects everybody. Lack of funding in key areas, economic downturn, we talked about. Public view of law enforcement, I think that speaks to what Adrian was talking about. Lack of an economic strategic plan. That might be something to get out ahead of this, to have a little bit of a plan for economic development. Federal and state legislation, particularly that relates to unfunded mandates that, they impose and affect you, but to do that. And we've talked again about impacts and use of social media. And I would say that one of the things, as a threat and an opportunity, this is when we talk about public information, media, marketing. This is where I think, the best defense is a good offense. Right? Tell the story you want to tell. Right? Don't let somebody tell your story for you. Right? All right. So let me back up and get to there. All right. I went. Any other threats, opportunities? We talked about the sales tax initiative. Anything else? I kind of blew through that. I don't want to step on that. If you think of anything on any of these things we went through today, so let's talk about that. Partly, I'd say we're probably 75-ish complete. right? Just like today, we were, sometimes when you read it out loud or you think about it, more people in the room do that. People add to that make perfect sense, right? And so this is still a work in progress. If there's things on, any of the things I shared before in your handouts on the environmental scan, the Paramount Way, internal, external issues, things the city manager's got to do or he's not doing his job, et cetera, or so we did SWOT, strengths, weakness, opportunity, threats. If there's some things you want to add, just send them through John, right?
Right.
Back to me. Now,
Absolutely.
what we'll try to do again, if it's an easy ad, it makes perfect sense, we'll do that. If there's something a little bit different, we may bring it back to the group to discuss, because I think this is best done by consensus, right? So if you have that, in particular, I want to really stress the importance and the value of the strategic initiative outcomes. Mission, vision, values is sort of, at some point, general, lofty, not very specific.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but it's still important, right? It's still important that you do that. The meaty stuff, we know we're a good city in Paramount when we accomplish these strategic outcomes. This is what we're trying to accomplish in the first place, right? We know, so the outcomes really speak to what does good work look like. So first of all, look at that as have we cast a broad enough spectrum to encompass most of the things that the city does. It doesn't really speak to administrative, most of the time, outcomes don't speak to administrative functions that are internal, other than some of the things on high-performing government, right? Internal things. So the city doesn't exist to do the finance department or to be the personnel department. Outcomes really speak to the effect that you have on the community. Of course, you have a finance department and purchasing and all that other stuff, but the city doesn't exist to do those things. It exists to serve. So the outcomes really should be focused on those things we know when we've affected this positive change in the community, right? So is it broad enough? Did we cover everything? Are there other, just like when we walk through all those 12 or 13 outcome statements for each of those categories, is there something we need to add or enhance, or just like we were wordsmithing a little bit? Yeah.
Oh my God, there were so many line items, right?
Mhm.
How do we not lose focus of so many line items, like a budget, right? How do we not lose focus to make sure that we're not missing something? Because those are all important things, you know?
So that's a good, here's how, what I've had the opportunity to work with the city of Downey for the last 4 years, and so every time when they do the budget, sometimes those, not so much each of those 12 outcomes, you don't regurgitate all those again, but the budget should support those 6 different categories of things that you're doing, and that's the everyday work. Sometimes you may add some new outcomes, those can change depending on what happens, or a work program could be developed that supports an outcome. So let's say, here's an example. Karina was talking about diversifying revenue sources, right? And leakage of sales tax. We also identified an economic development strategic plan, right? Now that's a task. At some point when the council says, okay, let's move forward, let's budget to do an economic strategic plan, that'll now become a task that supports a strong economy, and might support some of the other things as well that does that. So it sort of should, so everything that the city does should fit in some of those 6 categories, if we've done it well, right? And the other thing I think, particularly in light of the sales tax initiative, what I would encourage you to do, and this is really, after I left the city, but the city of Roseville did something very similar. They passed a sales tax initiative a year ago that added another $10 million to the city's general fund. But they went through this whole engage Roseville process. So similar to the survey that you did, and similar to this process that people went through, to talk about not just mission, vision, values, but more importantly, here are our goals in accomplishing things. And they engaged the community with that. And more importantly, they said, and this is where I think the opportunity for you is, here's what we're trying to accomplish as a city. We're trying to accomplish these things. And even those 12. I mean, I would, whatever those are, 12 or 13 or 14, it doesn't matter. But you post those on your website and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish as a city. Here's what we're focused on. We know we're doing good work when these things get accomplished. And if we can write those in the way that they're outcomes and not effort, then you can sort of say, well, what are you guys trying to do there as council? You can say, well, we're trying to do that. That's the value in that, right? Now, remember I said the largely councils live in ends, not means, right? And meaning the results that you expect. And those, you read those like, are these good results? If we did that, if we actually accomplished that, would that be a reflection that we've done good work, right? In the governance of the city. And so if you can say that, and we've covered those well enough and articulated the differences between all of those, then I think it is something you should communicate to your community. To the extent that you communicate to that, says here's what we're gonna do with your tax dollars, or here's, if we do pass the sales tax initiative, here's what we're gonna be spending the money on, right? And in addition, maybe added value services, or this would allow us to expand and enhance services in these areas, right? This is what's gonna get better, or these problems will get fixed, then people will support that, right?
I'm sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, Brenda, in answer to your question, because it is a little overwhelming, seeing all, each category has 10 to 12 objectives. If you focus just though on each of the outcomes, that is the title and the subtitle, when you're reviewing the budget, that would kind of guide your decision-making, your vote, whether or not to approve something. And of course, if you get down to it and you say, well, what does that mean? That's what the strategic outcomes are for, to kind of help you better kind of guide your thinking, your decision making after looking at what the outcome should be in a byline there. So.
And I shared with John, and I think I shared with the rest of the committee, one of the really good templates that I really like is the template that comes from Fort Collins, Fort Collins, Colorado. And I'll send that to John to share with you. And don't read it, it's their thing, it's not your thing. But what I like about the template is 3 pages. It is a very good way of explaining how all these things fit together. So rather than looking at multiple pages, it's sort of strategic plan at a glance. And people can, I got it. And I've shared that with a lot of agencies, because sometimes if it gets buried, or you don't do that and you don't look at that. But I like that template, so I'd like some feedback. Does that resonate with you? You may even see in Fort Collins similar objective outcomes that I stole from them, because they've been through this for a while. But it's also a way of communicating mission, vision, values, some of these other words that we described in terms of the goals. So it's sort of 3 pages at a glance would be very similar. And I think that makes it more manageable. Sure. Right? So the next step is we've got a little bit of some input and feedback on this. So let me just pause for a second and say, A, are you comfortable with the direction we're headed? Generally supportive, want to keep moving this forward. So this is that 75% bite at the apple, but there's still some work to be done, right? And are you supportive of the general sort of construct of this idea?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think so.
Okay, good. I've asked John and the rest of the department heads to, just like we rolled this out, now so they have this PowerPoint to roll it out in the handout and to go solicit some feedback. There may be some additions or modifications or thoughts that the employee groups at all levels do that maybe that didn't come up but are equally valid as they came up today. And I think sometimes one of the biggest mistakes organizations make in mission, vision, values, and strategic initiatives is it's a top-down thing. And so at some point, we've got to reach the rest of the organization and say, as you see the city, what do you see the strengths and weaknesses are? Because they may have a different perspective, right? You guys get to sit at the top of the pyramid, but somebody that's in the front line may have a very different perspective, and we want to be inclusive with that. Or just like the citizens might say, well, yeah, I think that's okay, but what about trails, right? Equally valid, right? I do think before, how many commissions do you have?
We have 5.
5. I do think once we get fairly close before we bring it to the council for final, might be either coincidental, bring it to them and just share this information as an initiative that you're working on, because they're also key stakeholders in doing that. So this is, kind of a work in progress to do that. And then at some point, there'll be a final version of this that gets brought to the council for approval. And even with that final approval, it won't be fait accompli. It'll be in that one hearing, which might be at a council meeting. There might be certainly opportunity for public testimony, certainly input, or you may now see it again in a slightly different light. So I think that can happen. So then you would adopt that. I understand that mission, vision, values typically don't change year to year. They should stand the test of time. But some of these outcome initiatives will wax and wane depending on what's going on. And so each year you should look at those again and say, are these still relevant and valuable? Do we need to change or add to those things that make some sense, right? So at some point, maybe it's just a workshop that say, let's validate those things. Typically, like with Downey, when I've done it with Downey and a couple other cities, we just take the budget goals workshop as to look once again at the strategic initiatives and said, is there anything that's changed that might modify these, right? And so then you get into the specific goals and objectives and new projects and programs for the budget. Okay. I'm like brain dead now. So, yes.
So, in the corporate world, you guys have all worked in companies, I'm sure, where you guys have built these types of vision, mission, values, and they kind of get in a book and they get shelved, right?
Mm-hmm.
You never really see them again. I mean, that's kind of what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, what are your thoughts? Like I'm saying, maybe it's just to maybe I understand. So, you build this, you're going to execute it, and then you're going to monitor results. Is that? I'm assuming that's the plan.
That's the plan is, and
Okay.
to look at the strategic objectives and incorporate them when we're proposing the budget to you. So this is something that's going to be ingrained in the department heads' minds.
It's going to be a
So-
reference too.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Exactly. So we'll never lose sight of it because that's how it's going to become. It's going to become part of our nature in a sense. So
And if
I also am going to publicize this obviously through the website, and once we're going through it, and let people know that we're going to the commissions for this if you want to give any input, so that there could be more community input if need be. So.
One thing.
Go ahead, Adrian, I'm sorry.
No, what I was gonna say is that I know we're formalizing it, but being an employee for over 2 decades now, we've informally had these, so I think we're just taking the step of formally adopting them because,
Yeah.
like mentioned before, we have this Paramount Way that as you continue your employment here, you understand what that is.
Mhm.
But now we're gonna have it formalized so that new employees and future generations understand what is expected of you and what are our results.
Mike, can I ask kind of to Brenda's point, have you ever seen it with other cities where these things like the strategic objectives or other elements of what we're doing here today is incorporated into the annual budget so that it's always there, it's always front and center.
You mean
You
the
don't
actual
forget.
document?
Yeah,
Oh,
the actual
document.
document.
Mhm.
Yeah, yes, that does happen. And I neglected to mention really one other important step we need to do. So if you look at this very first cover sheet and the colored triangle, so what's yet to be done, and I think this is really want to encourage you to delegate this task to the staff, is once we've done these strategic objectives, let's say we adopt those and they're correct. The next thing is to come up with outcome measurements and metrics. And that would be, that still remains to be done. And so how do we measure this? How do we know, right? So what are we keeping score about? And the measurements and metrics will be used as evidence of competence. So you develop those. That's largely, I would encourage that to be a staff-driven thing, that they still come back to you and say, we're going to use these measurements and metrics. I would suggest you don't try to create measurements and metrics for each one of those 12 things, because you'll go crazy. But those key things, so to think about measurements and metrics be in those 6 broad categories. What are the measurements and metrics that are most important for us to keep score on relative to healthy community, relative to economic health, those kind of things. And so those things, and those become performance objectives, right? But I would encourage you to delegate that to staff to do. And then once those measurements and metrics, then this is how it relates to the budget. The last thing, then there's city work programs or program goals and objectives or work program activities that support accomplishing those. And those really are funded by the fund that goes at. That's the everyday work. What are you doing to make sure the parks are safe, clean, and green, right? So what are you doing to make sure that happens, right? Or what are you doing to diversify the revenue sources, right? So those will be done, but probably won't be included in the document. What I really like to see, if we get this done well, is sort of that, if you like the template from Fort Collins, you'll get a chance to bring that back, and that gets looked at every year that sort of we're doing that if we need to change it. Probably won't be changing mission, vision, values every year. And the other thing I would encourage you to do too is, in addition to staff training, so new employee orientation or staff training, you go through this, but new commissioners and board members, we used to talk annually, there would be commissioner and board member training where everybody got together at least once a year. It was kind of a dinner thing, got a chance for the council, talked around a little bit of thank you, but you went over mission, vision, values, metrics, their role in doing the city. And so it was both a education, and then frankly there was some little things, some do's and don'ts like Brown Act and other stuff that we weaved in. Certainly at a minimum, new commissioner and board member board members.
No, just
new commissioner training at a minimum, but even if it's once a year, to take that opportunity to share that big picture, right? Because otherwise the world's just right in front of you, right? So anyway, any questions, feedback, comments?
Good.
Very good.
I really want to really thank the staff, because they've been doing a great job, and the 2 council members that initially participated in the September workshop provided that. Even today's feedback was useful for me, and I hope you appreciate. It doesn't matter that we're making some changes as we're moving along. That's what we wanted to do today. Not that this is expect you to adopt it whole cloth. It's still a work in progress. So I appreciate everybody's work, and thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm gonna get something to eat now.
You can have some lunch now, okay? Good. Any comments or committee reports, council members? For today, maybe Tuesday? Staff?
No, sir.
And this meeting is adjourned until November 19th at 5 p.m.